Hello, my name is Christian Matter. We're sitting here at the ESC meeting in Rome. I'm from the University Hospital in Zurich, cardiology, and I'm joined by two people here. I'm very pleased to introduce Gyöi Mahi from Bern, who will be the presenter of the SIRTAX study, and from Davide Capodanno, who is associate professor from Catania in Sicily. Could you please start, Gyöi, and tell us what your study SIRTAX is all about? What was the rationale to start that study?
Thank you very much. And I would like to introduce our study about the long-term outcomes comparing PES and CES. And SIRTAX study included 1,012 patients. And the main primary rationale is comparing CES versus PES, but we focus on this long-term outcome study on the not only comparing but the evaluate long-term outcomes.
So perhaps quickly, you mean by CES, you mean sirolimus eluting stents, right?
Yes, sirolimus eluting stents and paclitax eluting stents.
So it's the follow-up of the initial study published in New England Journal 10 years ago by Stefan Windecker. And now what is the special thing about that? What did you find? What was the design of the study?
So we conducted 10 years follow-up, and we showed the ischemic-driven TLR is attenuated beyond 5 years.
So the target lesion revascularization, that was attenuated annually. And what else?
The incidence of stent thrombosis also attenuated beyond 5 years.
So you actually saw that they increased at the beginning, but then it was kind of a steady state in terms of the annual rate of target lesion events. What else do you find out in that particular study? In terms of events, perhaps the major adverse cardiovascular events, what about those?
The incidence of MACE is also attenuated beyond 5 years.
So that was actually a very nice outcome of these first generation drug-eluting stents. I think a very important event. What do you think was the conclusion, the main conclusion of your findings?
The annual rate of ischemic-driven TLR is beyond 1 year is 1.8% per year and attenuated to 0.73% at 72% per year, and also the annual risks of stent thrombosis were attenuated from 0.67% per year to 0.32% per year.
So actually you show very nice results of that study of the first generation stents that were outstanding in terms of safety and efficacy, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
May I hand over to Davide Capodanno? You're the discussant of that study. What is your view? How did you judge this study?
Well, first of all, I would say that these authors have to be congratulated, because it's very difficult to follow these patients over time up to 10 years. That's very uncommon. Recently, a task force of the European Committee has kind of recommended 5 years of follow-up after stent trials. So going beyond 5 years represents a great challenge, and they were able to collect follow-up information for 90% of their patients, which is a huge challenge, particularly because, of course, patients may have moved, may have passed away, etc. So having said that, the results of the study are very, very interesting and inform our practice too. These are first generation drug-eluting stents, of course. Now these stents are no longer in the market, so one may wonder why this study is interesting. But you all know, remember that 10 years ago or something, there was a huge discussion on the safety of drug-eluting stents, and particularly first-generation drug-eluting stents were under this firestorm, let's say, because there was concern that even if they are more effective than bare metal stents, they have safety issues such as very late thrombosis, etc. So I found very interesting and also surprising that you do not observe a catch-up in this event after 5 years, and it's quite reassuring to see that even with this old technology, there is actually a decrease in these events.
Particularly for the patients who still have those stents implanted, right?
Obviously, there are millions of patients worldwide, so these results are reassuring to them and their doctors. I agree.
Could you perhaps expand a little bit on the second generation stents, what evidently has been achieved in between as compared to these first generation stents?
Yeah, I think they have addressed a lot of the limitations of the first generation, in that they have thin struts. So with Cypher and with Taxus, we were in the range of 150 or something. Now we are in the range of 80 microns or less. So thin struts, that's very important to reduce the rates of thrombosis, for example. Other point, the polymers, so the carrier of the anti-proliferative drug, was also deemed to have inflammatory effect. So this is another potential trigger for thrombosis. And now the polymers are more biocompatible, or are even biodegradable, which is a very important advancement, because it's a drug-eluting stent. After some period, the polymer disappears and it becomes a bare metal stent. Or now there are also stents that are polymer-free. So they have no carrier and the drug is directly on the platform. It's obvious, and now it's an evidence in the literature, a growing evidence, that the rates of thrombosis have dramatically decreased with this new technology.
So a very, very important point you mentioned. Could you perhaps also expand a little bit, not only on the stents, but also on the systemic therapy that evidently has evolved as well in this decade that we have passed through?
Obviously, the therapies that we use today are different from the therapies that we used 10 years ago or 20 years ago. In fact, in the paper, I like very much that they also discuss the issue of statin therapy as a potential explanation for the good result that they had, because these patients were very compliant to therapy. So it's difficult to disconnect and disentangle the role of therapy and the role of device, but the combination of both probably has the majority of the effect.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We're coming to the end of the discussion. Could you perhaps summarize a key message to our viewers in 1-2 sentences of your study?
So in the SIRTAX study, so the incidence of stent thrombosis and also the incidence of ischemic dream tear is relatively high comparing to other studies beyond 1 year, between 1 year to 5 years. But the higher incidence of such increase, such a higher index is attenuated. But we compare to the other studies, so such as long-term outcomes of bare metal stents. So the incidence of TLR is 0.1% per year between 1 to 5 years, which means the accelerated increase between 1 to 5 years
is leveled off, huh?
Yeah.
So it's very safe, actually. They remain safe and efficacious after 5 years. Davide, could you perhaps give our viewers a key message for the end?
To me, the key message is that the bar of drug-eluting stents is now set very high as a benchmark for other technologies. So we can expect second-generation drug-eluting stents to do at least as good as you had with the first generation drug-eluting stents, possibly better. So now the pressure is on bioresorbable stents, maybe, because they are expected to address all the long-term issues of metallic platforms, permanent platforms. But of course, if the results are so good, it will be very challenging for this device to show a difference. And so we will see. It's just a matter of time to see which will become the most used device in our cath labs.
Yeah, I think we really have achieved a lot in the stent area there, getting to the top of the ceiling. We perhaps can improve somewhat with systemic treatment, optimal patient selection prevention, but you definitely show with your excellent study that we're doing very, very well, even with the first generation, and the future looks bright. So I thank you both, you too, and our viewers for coming here together, and thereby close this fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.